evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Susanna Hermans of Oblong Books, and tonight we are here to present the newest novel by our dear, dear friend, Elizabeth Cunningham. Elizabeth is, of course, the creator of the exquisite Maeve Chronicles, which I feel like almost all of you have probably completely consumed. But now she's on to something new, which can only mean great things. Her first mystery novel has just been published, Murder at the Rummage Sale, and we are so thrilled to celebrate its publication with all of her friends and fans and loved ones here tonight. So we do have plenty of copies available of her older books, her new book, and we hope that you'll take a few home, maybe grab one for a friend who couldn't make it. But without further ado, I will present the exceptional Elizabeth Cunningham.
This story begins in the night. There will be a dawn. That's this story. That's not why we're here. This story actually begins in the afternoon in 1960, which is 56 years ago. In late August, an afternoon like this one. And in case I know that Susanna told you that Elizabeth, you were going to see her, but I am Maeve Ruad. Yes, I am. You must use your imaginations. I think most of you know who I am. You will see Elizabeth in a little while. And in case you have trouble telling us apart, I am the one with the hair. Elizabeth is the one with the reading glasses. Don't be confused. Now, perhaps you're wondering why I am here, since it's not about me. Well, I was Elizabeth's narrative character for 20 years, from womb to, well, I'm not in my tomb yet. And Elizabeth and I toured together for 10 years. And I am, a novelist. Novelists are shy. They like to hide behind their characters. Novelists are those people who never outgrow needing an imaginary friend. And I am Elizabeth's best imaginary friend forever, which is Biff for short. And it also seems that I'm her MC, and she did mention something on Facebook about I'm her publicist now, so I guess I'm going to be around for a while. And she asked me to introduce her new book and her new narrative characters. But first, I want to say thank you so much to Oblong Books. Thank you, Susanna. I think that Elizabeth has launched every book here.
I think so.
Yep. And thank you all for coming. And thank you to my publishers who are here, Imagination Fury Arts, Tim Dillinger-Curitin and Ray Curitin-Dillinger. I did it right. Okay. So, on with the show. Thank you for being here. So, when Elizabeth finished writing my story after 20 years, she was flummoxed. And she did not have any idea what she was going to do next. And then it came to her, lo, I will write a memoir. Everyone else writes a memoir, and I am now surely old enough to write a memoir. So Elizabeth started writing about her childhood in a little church in a small town, perhaps not far from here. And very soon she discovered that she did not want to write a memoir at all, because remember what I said about these shy novelists needing their characters to hide behind. So instead, Elizabeth said, I want to go back to that novel, Murder at the Rummage Sale, that I tried to write 30 years before. Because Elizabeth never got over this great image that she had of the body underneath the rummage, 3 floors of rummage in this huge parish house. So I don't know how many people here are old enough to remember real rummage sales. And what they had then was, we didn't have malls. We didn't have Bad Friday or Good Friday or whatever it's called, or Super Friday. We had the rummage sale. We had people lining up down the street. So Elizabeth really wanted to write about that time and place. She wanted to write about that epic event. But 30 years ago, she wasn't ready, and she wasn't ready to write about the people who helped shape who she is. And tonight, you're going to meet some of those people. 4 of them, 4 narrative characters. So this is a big leap for Elizabeth. I mean, I was in the 1st century, but I have this really in-your-face voice that's first person. So also, I don't know whether you want to call it historical fiction, historical fantasy, hysterical fantasy, but she is jumping genre. But perhaps the biggest leap that she's making is from first-person narrative, which she worked in for 20 years, back to an old-fashioned third-person narrative with 4 narrative characters. So a narrative character, which probably all of you know, is the character that you get to see through their eyes. You know what they know. You don't know what they don't know. And there are 4 of them in the third person. And I'm going to ask them tonight, though, I'm going to ask them to speak directly to you in their own first-person voices. So you've seen me, and you can picture me when you have to. You know what I look like. So first I want to introduce you to Lucy Way, who is the oldest narrative character. She's got beautiful, soft white curls. Very likely she's wearing a comfortable, old-fashioned tweed. She might have gardening pads on her knees, a soft blouse. She's a real lady. So I'm going to ask Lucy Way if she'll speak to you. Lucy, would you mind speaking a little bit to the people here? Actually, I would rather mind. I'm not used to speaking about myself, and certainly not in public. I never would have agreed to be in a novel with a first-person narrative, and frankly, I don't know how our hostess managed it for so many years. That said, very firmly in the third person, I am one of the detectives of the novel, but only one. And please, no Miss Marple jokes, although my fellow characters do not refrain from making them. And why? Simply because I'm an older woman, never married, and believe me, in 1960 that term old maid was still in use, and spinster. So easy to type people, isn't it? Now, because I'm quiet and reserved, some people like to endow me with the virtues of a saint. Like Mildred Thompson tends to get me confused not with Miss Marple, but with the pure in heart in the Beatitudes. And Charlotte Crowley, you'll be hearing a lot more about her. She tends to condescend to me. She thinks that because I've never married, I'm unworldly and inexperienced. But people tend to forget I was a nurse in the Second War, and I've seen my fair share of life and of death, I can tell you. I don't really mind not being married, not anymore. I did mind not having my own children, but there is such a thing as having a child of your own heart, and you'll be meeting her soon. But people like Charlotte tend not to realize the pleasures of a solitary life. Just getting up in the morning, going outside with your coffee, listening to the birds, picking herbs from your kitchen garden, watching how the light changes in the course of a day or the course of a season. And yes, lots of time for prayer and contemplation. Not that I don't have my sorrows, some of them secret, some of them I've never told anyone. And I'm very happy that Charlotte Crowley did not find me interesting enough to pry into my private life. Now, when Mother died, Charlotte wanted to help me sort through her things, and I very firmly refused. This is not gossip, because everyone knows it, and you will know it. Charlotte Crowley is what you might call light-fingered. Things have a way of finding their way into her pocket, up her sleeve. But there's one thing that Charlotte loves better than trinkets, and that's other people's secrets. Well, she never found out my secret. But if I'm honest, I have to admit that it was my secret that blinded me to the truth. I know, Mavroid, I better stop now. I could be giving away plot. And really, I'd just as soon get back to my garden. Thank you all for being here. thank you all for being here. It's Elizabeth now. So what I'm going to do is read a little snippet after each character introduces themselves. So this is Lucy's little snippet, and she is in her garden. And the murder's already happened much later than it was supposed to, according to my agent. I don't know if she's here. It did happen. And Lucy's in her garden thinking about it, because that's where she thinks about things. And although this began on an August afternoon, much of it happens in September. So think September here. There was something about an autumn garden that was particularly moving. The last flowers among the dried remains of earlier ones. Poppies, hosta, lilies, bee balm. The spring flowers already sleeping in their bulbs. Life, death, regeneration. All cheek by jowl in her gardens. You know, in her garden, death did not seem terrible. Things have their season, they die, they return. Everything held in that great rhythm, that great round. Except when it was disrupted, usually by human agency. Gardeners were intimate not only with death, but with killing, if she were to be honest. Weeds got uprooted, slugs drowned in beer, Japanese beetles trapped or crushed, lettuces were thinned, trees pruned, hedges cut back. There was no malice in it, but there was no denying that as a gardener, she played God. What made murder different? That you perpetrated it against one of your own kind? That it was motivated by malice or hatred? The worst mass murders were done by people who claimed they were saving the world, or their country, or their people. Did they think of pogroms and holocausts as no bedstraw to keep it from choking the flowers? Murder was different. How was it different? I want you to pick, you're going to meet the youngest narrative character. So picture a little girl with her hair coming out of her barrettes, and she's probably wearing shorts, and her knees are probably grass stained. So I'd like to call Catherine and see if she would come and speak to you. Catherine, would you come and say hello? Hello. Catherine, how old are you? Grown-ups always ask that. I'm 7. I'm in 2nd grade, and I can read to myself now. Not just picture books, real books. I like Narnia the best. Catherine, what's that in your hand? It's my knife. It's just like Frankie's. My mother didn't want me to get it, but she said I could get anything I wanted with my own allowance at the workers' sale before the Rummage Sale, and I was a worker, so I wanted this knife. Mr. McCready didn't want to sell it to me. He says, "What does a wee lass need with a knife?" And he said that I couldn't have it unless I recited a psalm. But I'm only in 2nd grade, and we haven't done psalms yet. But then I remembered that Miss Abersbach, the choir, were singing the 23rd Psalm, so I sang it to him, and he gave me the knife. Well, what are you going to do with it, Catherine? I'm going to make a javelin, just like Frankie's. Because Frankie and I have to catch the bad man that we saw in the woods. The bad man doesn't belong there, but Frankie and me do, even though God doesn't want us there because it's trespassing. Can I tell you something? I don't really like God. I wish he'd stop watching me. I know exactly what you mean. Well, maybe you have fairy blood too. Lucy Way, that's the lady with the thistledown hair. She says Frankie and me have fairy blood, and that's why we belong in the woods. Lucy Way has fairy blood too. Catherine, whenever Elizabeth has a new book, somebody has to sing. Would you sing part of the psalm that you sang for Mr. McCready? Can I sing the verse with the descant? Miss Abersbach only lets Aramantha and me sing the descant. The rest of the people have to stay on the tune. Yea, though I pass through shadowed vale, yet will I fear no ill, for thou art with me, and thy rod and staff me comfort still. Thy rod and staff me comfort still. So now you're going to hear a little snippet from Catherine's point of view. And the context for this is it's 1960, remember, it's September. All the children have come on Saturday with their parents who are helping at the rummage sale. And on one side of the driveway, there's one set of kids, on the other, another set of kids, and they're yelling, Nixon, Kennedy, Nixon, Kennedy. And that got a little boring after a while, so one kid picked up some pebbles and threw them at the other kids. And Catherine's friend Frankie got blamed for it. He got set up. So he's very upset, and he's rushed off, and Catherine's gone to find him. Catherine found Frankie on the other side of the parish house under the fire escape that led from the second floor. He had his pocket knife out and was whittling the point of a javelin. Frankie did not say anything when he saw her, just kept whittling. So she didn't say anything either, just sat next to him. I'm gonna kill Dickie Foster. Catherine felt scared. Killing was bad, worse than trespassing. She felt hot and cold all over, remembering that she had been going to kill God and Jesus. But you couldn't kill them. They were already dead. Or at least Jesus had been killed a long time ago by some bad men. Would Frankie really kill Dickie? Don't, Frankie, she pleaded. You'd have to go to jail. So, said Frankie, so what? What's wrong with going to jail? Catherine remembered that Frankie's pops had been in jail before he had come to work at their church. Well, you wouldn't be able to go in the woods, she pointed out, not for a long time anyway. Frankie stopped whittling for a moment. He looked dreamy now, as if he were seeing things that were not right there. After I kill Dickie, I will hide in the woods, like that man we saw, the one with the horns. No one will find me there. Then I won't have to go to jail. Catherine felt afraid again. She wanted the woods to belong to her and Frankie. She did not want that scary man to be there, and she did not want Frankie to be like that man at all. Dickie is bad, she told Frankie. He threw the stones, not you. I told on him to his father. You don't have to kill him. His father will punish him. Frankie looked at her. You told on Dickie? To his father? Catherine, Frankie said after a moment, do you want to be my blood sister? I would have to cut you with my knife, just a little bit, and you'd have to cut me too. That's how Indians do it. Catherine nodded again. She was scared, but it was a good kind of scared. Give me your hand. She held out her hand to Frankie. Holding her right hand with his left, he made a tiny cut on her forefinger. It hardly even hurt. Then he gave her the knife and held out his right hand. It was much harder to cut than to be cut, but she managed, with the tip of the blade, to prick him enough to draw a bead of blood from his finger. Now we mix our blood, Frankie told her, and they pressed their bloody fingers together and made little circles with the tips to be sure the blood got all mixed up. Catherine, now you are my blood sister forever and ever. Frankie, now you are my blood brother forever and ever. going to meet Anne Bradley. And I don't know who remembers the dresses that women wore in 1960 with the shirt waist and a place for their cigarettes and a belt, tight belt around the waist and a full skirt and a permanent wave. So picture Anne Bradley, who is the wife of the minister and the mother of Catherine. Anne, I know you're really, really busy with the rummage sale, but would you spare us a few minutes? Wife of, mother of, hell's bells. That was not a very feminist introduction, Maeve Ruad. And you are supposed to be a feminist icon. But feminism, as you understand it, hadn't been dreamed up in 1960. I mean, women had the vote. Men were back from the war. Women had modern appliances. We had Betty Crocker. What more could anyone want? Well, I'll tell you what I wanted. I wanted a little privacy, thank you very much. Living in the rectory, across the driveway from the church and up the driveway from the parish house was like living in a fishbowl. People coming and going all day long, feeling free to drop in on the rector at any time, who, by the way, never seemed to be at home, and I usually didn't know where he was, so they would take me as second best, as if I was his appendage. Like Mildred Thompson asking me to advise her about her prayer life. I know nothing about prayer. I haven't prayed since my son, Hal, died when he was only 5 years old. That's his picture there, but I'm not going to show it to you. It's mine. Well, after my son died, I didn't care very much about being a good minister's wife or a good wife. I just went through the motions. And when we moved to this little town church from New York City, I was really glad that Charlotte Crowley wanted to continue to be the reigning queen of the women of regeneration. I was not going to fight her for place. I didn't want to be in charge of anything. And then Charlotte Crowley had to go and get herself murdered. And somehow I ended up in charge of the whole shebang. And on that note, I'm going to excuse myself. I've got to get back to it. So, we have the corpse already here. We're past page 70. And this is a little snippet about Anne, very much in the vein that you just heard. And all these snippets that I'm reading are heavily edited for brevity, so if you want every golden word, you know what to do. Anne was annoyed with herself for being annoyed. She could not blame poor Charlotte Crowley for her unfortunate death, yet somehow she did. As she hurried to get dressed for Charlotte's funeral, with her stocking snapped into place, Anne went to her bureau to consult her jewelry box. Her dress wasn't solid black, but had tiny gold and red fleur-de-lis flecking it. She could wear the small gold earrings that Gerald had given her when Catherine was born, and though she usually avoided the reminder, she decided to wear the short strand of pearls that had been Gerald's gift at Hal's birth. They had their own satin-lined box, and she kept them tucked away in the drawer with the linen and lace handkerchiefs, where she kept Hal's picture, the one Charlotte had found that evening Anne caught her snooping. Anne touched the frame now without picking it up, just to reassure herself that it was there. She wished Charlotte had not seen it. She did not intend to forgive Charlotte for her desecration just because she was dead. Anne knew she was not a good Christian. Perhaps she was not a Christian at all, but at least she would not be a hypocrite. She would wear the pearls to the funeral not to honor Charlotte, but to remind herself that she could not lose what she'd already lost. Now we have our token male, Gerald Bradley. And I want you to picture him in his clergy outfit, which would be a black shirt and what he called a dog collar, which he really hated wearing, but he was probably just on official calls or something. So as soon as he gets home, he stuffs it in his pocket or on the car seat and forgets about it, and probably Anne has to deal with it. So that's Gerald. Gerald, would you come and say a few words to the people? Gerald? Gerald? Gerald, put down the martini. I'm Gerald Bradley, the Reverend Gerald Bradley. Now that's a title. A lot of people say Reverend Bradley, and that's wrong. It's the Reverend. Remember that. Now I don't mind being called Rev by my buddies at the fire department. And by the way, I'm the very first Episcopal minister in this town to join the volunteer fire department. And whatever you do, do not call me Father Bradley. I've had a hell of a time breaking some parishioners of that habit, but think about it. If you call the minister Father, what does that make the congregation? Children. Children who just want Father knows best to be the professional Christian while they just sit in their pews and feel pious. And that's all some of them want to do. Like Mildred Thompson, always concerned about the condition of her soul. Monstrous. Now, Christianity is not about individual salvation. It's not about getting brownie points so you can go to heaven. And it is not about blonde, blue-eyed Jesus carrying the fleecy little white lambs. You know what the Good Shepherd really does? The Good Shepherd takes the sheep and he dips them in sheep dip to get rid of their parasites. I preached a sermon on that once. A lot of people didn't like it. But it's my job to wake people up, to make them realize that the gospel is relevant for today's time. You know, when Jesus judged between the nations in Matthew 25, and he said, I was naked and he clothed me, he wasn't just talking about individual people doing good deeds, like a Boy Scout helping someone across the street. He was judging between the nations. And our nation is in a moral crisis. And every Christian, black and white, should be answering the call of Dr. King to go out into the street and march. Gerald? Not the full sermon, and not right now. I said not the time for it. What time is it? Oh, the sun's over the yardarm. You know, that's not easy being in charge of a parish community. And when one of them goes and gets herself murdered, and then the rest. Oh, Father! Mr. Bradley. Mildred answered the door and led him through a dark coat-lined hall to a small parlor with a table set for two in a windowed alcove. I was just about to serve luncheon. Please join us. Before he could answer, that was on his feet, heading for the bar. Glad you're here. Scotch or gin, Gerald? Though he had a well-earned reputation as a martini man, Gerald had been thinking of Scotch. There was an autumnal nip in the air, and its amber color was mellow as autumn oak leaves. Before Gerald could express his preference, Mildred sprang into action, and through some practically aerodynamic feat, landed herself between Nat and the bar. Now, Nat, remember we talked about that. Mildred spoke in a low voice as if Gerald could not hear or shouldn't. But look here, May, I have a guest, and Charlotte always said, I am sure Mr. Bradley does not drink in the middle of the day. Gerald felt his mouth opening. He looked for words of protest that would not offend Mildred. Christ our Lord always had a wineskin at hand. There were parables about it. Actually, I would love... Gerald began. Now come, both of you, sit down at the table. Mildred took Nat's arm and motioned Gerald to follow. I'll just set another place. Lunch won't be a minute. Mildred bustled about, setting the extra place, apparently already familiar with the location of the tarnished silver and the yellowed linen placemats. "I'll just serve the soup," she said, and for a blessed moment the men were alone. "Millie's been awfully good to me, you see," said Nat miserably. "Awfully good." Gerald agreed silently. Mildred came in with the soup. It was gray soup. The grayest soup Gerald had ever seen. The sort of thing Oliver Twist might have eaten in the poorhouse. Only he wouldn't have pleaded for more. Gerald wanted to call it gruel. Mildred swiftly returned with a third bowl for herself and a plate of thinly sliced, scantily buttered bread. "Mr. Bradley," she said, seating herself, "will you please say grace?" Gerald could not help wondering, as he blessed the graceless meal, if he were breaking bread, so to speak, with a murderess. So now you've met all 4 narrative characters. These are your companions that... Uh-oh, here comes trouble. Maeve Rude! How dare you leave me out of this presentation? I am the most important character in the whole book. Well, Charlotte, you could make a case for that, but you're not a narrative character. A narrative? But as if I knew or cared what you're talking about. I intend to have my say. I am Charlotte Crowley, most unjustly the victim. Just because I take a healthy interest in my fellow human beings. I should have been the detective. I would have done a much better job than Lucy Way, for heaven's sake. And why couldn't Mildred have been the victim? Nobody liked her. And it's clear she was after my husband for years. Also, if I had been the detective, there could have been a whole series of cozy church murders. Another Charlotte Crowley mystery, it would have said on the cover. Oh, Charlotte. That's enough now. Now is not the time to remind people that Elizabeth can't write on formula to save her life. If you will take a seat, I will ask Elizabeth to read a snippet of the prologue starring you. It's your big narrative moment, Charlotte, so sit down. So, context for this is that the rummage is all in the parish house and it's going to be sorted later in the day, but Charlotte's there early. She unlocks the door and steps inside, not bothering to lock it behind her. Today is the great rummage sale sort. After church, the women will swarm the place, busy as ants or bees, and she, their queen, will preside as they make order. But it's the mad jumble she loves, the flotsam and jetsam of so many lives crammed in one place. She starts to hum as she makes her way upstairs, stopping to peek in half-opened boxes. Oh, she missed it yesterday. An old jewelry box full of trinkets, a brooch shaped like a fan, a 3-strand rhinestone bracelet with a silver clasp. Oh, look, an antique handkerchief stained to the center, but edged with what appears to be handmade pointe de gaze lace. Best of all, a locket. Patiently, she pries it open as if it were an oyster about to disgorge the pearl of great price. Empty? What a cheat. She tosses it back, but the lovely old handkerchief finds its way up the sleeve of her jacket. Ah, too soon it's time to go. But look, no cars in the driveway yet. Perhaps she can steal a few more minutes. It occurs to her it might be fun to have a private peek at the parish house office. Of course, it ought to be locked, with so many people coming and going during the rummage sale. How careless to leave the door open. Reprehensible, really. She begins to hum again as she walks through the rector's study to the secretary's office. Gracious, the file cabinets are not locked either. She opens one, and with a sigh of deep contentment, she delves into this unexpected trove of treasure. The funeral plans parishioners are encouraged to file. Records of annual giving and who gets handouts from the discretionary fund. What else might she find? Almost purring with pleasure, she does not hear the front door click open or closed. She's left the doors to the offices ajar. She may be a snoop, but she's no sneak. She does not hear the careful, almost silent footsteps. Then suddenly, a hand on her shoulder. She startles, but recovers quickly. She's been caught before. She doesn't care. She has no shame. Smiling, she turns to see who it is, utterly confident in her charm. What she does not know, what she cannot consider, since no one asked, is this: if she could choose the last face she would ever see, would this face be the one? And now, Elizabeth, we really are done with all the characters, and I think Gerald and I are going to go to the bar. I'm going to leave you here with Elizabeth in case you have any questions. And she might not even have to put on her glasses again, but I'm out of here.